the panel, Eileen Hartmann. She's president of the Cornwall, the Greater Great. I'm sorry?
Cornwall.
I know. But the Greater.
Great.
Right. Chamber of Commerce, and she's a business person. She's part of the Town of Cornwall Economic Advisory Committee, and she's a business owner. She can describe a little bit more about herself and talk about what they've been doing in Cornwall. Naomi, I hope I got this right. Naomi Herson-Gringskog?
Yeah.
That was not bad, huh?
Perfect.
Okay. Now, I wanted to read part of Naomi's bio because I think frankly, I think it captures a lot of what we're trying to do today and talk about. She founded the Department of Small Interventions to launch a base-placed planning project for planning projects that amplify cultural assets, galvanize collaboration, build social infrastructure. She also, prior to this, had co-founded the no longer empty New York City not-for-profit that transforms vacant properties into site-specific exhibitions. They're really all things that are very consistent with what we're talking about today. She also is a graduate of the Columbia University Master's Program. Maybe one of your former professors is here. I may have been, I don't think so, though. And she's a part of the Storm King Center's Young Council, an Institute for Public Architecture. She's going to be talking about, I think, one of the exciting projects that we've undertaken. And Molly O'Donnell, who I knew mostly as Mayor Kyle Roddy's right and left hand and kept him afloat. Molly has been involved with a number of projects in Goshen, and she founded the Illuminate Goshen nonprofit organization that had the goal of engaging the community and to create events and places for all to enjoy. And I read those little pieces because I think they capture what it is we're trying to do. I just wanted to go back for a minute. I wanted to build on something that Lou had mentioned earlier and Nancy mentioned. The Citizens Foundation has a number of missions, one of which is trying to assure good planning in Orange County and beyond. And we had one of the many committees we had was a land use and planning committee. And as Lou said, we started a number of years ago. We were trying to upgrade the quality of planning in the county. And we hosted a breakfast one day, the Lou and Stu show, and we went back and forth and started the placemaking effort. And it's taken off. This is our 11th annual, and I think we've tried to change it in a number of ways over the years, but all geared toward trying to make Orange County a better place with quality communities. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have actually happened. Mike talked on his presentation about a lot of exciting projects. This is really a way of dealing with shorter term solutions to urban problems primarily, but they're transferable to a lot of other places. And hopefully they will generate longer term solutions, but one of the strengths of tactical urbanism is not only learning how to do things short term that might lead to long term, way of engaging citizenry, getting people together. Even the mere act of doing the projects gets people together into places that function the way we would like them to function, where people getting together, talking, doing, and enjoying being together. So that's a lot of what we're talking about today, and we're going to see how it's been implemented in the county. And whoever wants to start, I have no strong opinion about that. You can go right to left,
Okay,
left to right.
I can begin.
Okay.
And I'm speaking about one of the projects, right?
Speaking about it, yes, one of the projects.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
and you can expand
I was a bit eager. I
beyond
applied
it.
for 3 and did all 3 as well.
Yeah, I think you can talk about any of them and
I'll
and the
do-
lessons you've learned.
Okay, okay. Hi, it's wonderful to see a room full of interested placemakers. So the project that I spearheaded with Orange County, creating healthy communities and schools. Jessica Ridgway from Orange County Planning is in the back, so I want to give credit, she was there from the beginning, came from a training workshop that we had, the Transportation Advisory Committee of Newburgh had hosted in June. So we had deliberately reached out to a lot of different stakeholders, schools, business owners, independent living, really trying to get a wide spectrum of who lives in Newburgh to attend this workshop and learn what complete streets is. The policy had just passed, and now we had some public education work to do. So we had this wonderful half day where maybe 25 people came and learned about what complete streets. Most of them were unfamiliar with it, were not planners. And when we were doing sidewalk audits and site visits, people started saying, oh, this is my experience in this corner, or this is what I feel at that corner. And that is actually the impetus for the project that got funded by the Orange County Citizens Foundation. Two parents from Horizons on the Hudson, which is on South Street in Montgomery, talked about the problems that they had experienced where children are let off or picked up at their school. And from that, you have this toolbox in the back of your mind of, well, what can we do and what can be sort of achievable with very little sources and very little capacity. And what we did was not a crosswalk mural, but more of an intersection mural. So, the area between the four sidewalks is what we painted. So there's a lot of details of how that happened and so forth. But I think, some of the main points of lessons learned, and this is also referenced in what Mike Lydon was talking about, is materials are really important. Preparations are really important. So learning from others that have done it, exchanging information is important. So what I think this room has the potential to do is exchange tips and lessons learned on that very specific element. The other thing that was learned is how to work with government. For government, it's sometimes what you're proposing is something that is maybe not a priority, but is also something new. So the patience and educating and also being cognizant of taking a little bit maybe more of the burden and maybe not expecting too much of them, managing expectations on both ends is crucial. What I'm very happy about is now that we've done this project, government has a streamlined process of how to do it again. So it was a lesson learned on their end as well. And when there's change in the community, I think people naturally show up and spread the word, and that can always be enhanced. So the lessons learned in terms of community outreach, I have to think about that one, but people really wanted change in their community, and so it was very easy to pull it off. I think that's a good summary.
Actually, what we'll do is we'll each present, and then you can ask each other some questions, and then we'll have some I may have a couple of questions also. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly O'Donnell. I am from the Village of Goshen. A little bit of background about myself. I am very involved in my local community. I run two nonprofits. One is Illuminate Goshen. The second is Goshen in Bloom. Illuminate Goshen is what I was asked to come here today. We've had very successful projects in the village in the last 5 years since we've started. Stu mentioned Kyle Roddy. He was the mayor of our village for 7 years about, and he really pulled me in and asked to help collaborate, because it is so hard to get the government to be on your side early on. I think that was one of our key successes, is that Kyle really engaged our. We're going to talk about some of our projects. We've done piano projects, which was great, painted pianos around the village, really brought people in and listening to the art and the music and seeing how we've collaborated with our Goshen Art League is here today. They're one of the recipients of a grant, and we've been lucky enough to have a grant, so I'm happy to be here today and looking forward to answering any questions people have.
Okay, I'm Eileen Hartmann, and I'm from the town of Cornwall. I'm here as part of the Greater Cornwall Chamber of Commerce. I also sit on the Town of Cornwall Town Advisory Board for Economic Development. I said to Nancy, with the word success, we've sort of been working on this since 2001 in various stages along the way. The Chamber picked up the project in 2012 and started pushing it. We've had various things of resistance, and you used the word change. Change in Cornwall is sometimes a dirty word, and so there's different walls and stuff that we've had to jump over to try to get things done. And so in the center of Cornwall, Main Street, we have the village and the town. As far as the Chamber is concerned, it's one town. The politics of the village and the town, we try to stay out of the businesses that our members, belong to the one chamber. We have what's called Bridge Street. It's this little street that connects our Main Street to a secondary street behind it that has been closed since 2001. It's now been taken off the rolls as not being there, so it's a perfect place for a pocket park. We wanted to put tables, chairs, benches, help to increase the walkability on Cornwall Main Street, and the resistance has been there. So the Chamber, as well as applying for, we received a very nice grant from this, as actually he was assemblyman at the time, for redoing Main Street and stuff, and it got caught up in the political things after spending many weeks of going to meetings during a summer each week and stuff. So there's been a lot of challenges and stuff. So what the Chamber has done is we have used the word events that we have. We just recently had our Halloween Spooktacular. We set up on Main Street, and we had a magician there. We give out the awards there. We have a parade that starts and finishes there. We'll put bands there. At our fall festival, which is a big street fair, we put tables there, set it up, have people come and eat with their food there, and stuff like that to show everybody that if we had this as a regular park, you could be doing this, getting an ice cream, coming and sitting here all the time if you're walking on Main Street and stuff. And we'll be using it next week. We have our Christmas festival, and we'll be doing the same thing with Santa Land there. So we're kind of trying to buck the system to show everybody in town how it can be used, and that change isn't such a bad word.
Okay, good start. Just to go back to the Bridge Street project, I sort of know where it is, but you can describe a lot more. That street it's been taken off of the street map, so it's no longer a public street.
Correct.
So who owns it now? Do we know?
I guess the town of Cornwall would own it now.
Oh, it's still on.
It was a town street. As most of you, if you're in the small communities, know, the county might own one of your roads, the state owns another road, and then the town owns another
Right.
road, and to get anything done. So the county owns Main Street, but the town owns that property. But there's also property owners on each side who have a parking space that kind of goes into the road. So there's all kinds of little nuances that go with it. But it's a small little bridge. It's not like one of your big bridges that goes over a brook. Mm-hmm. So it's a perfect place, for a park. And in the arguments and stuff that went back and forth, right before our fall festival a couple of years ago, the town decided, well, it's too dangerous for anyone to walk over, and shut it off with all kinds of barriers and stuff like that. Then people who were coming to the festival had to walk all the way up to either one end or the other of Main Street to get in there. So, we've been headbutting back and forth. Since then, they put up metal fences that all the residents who walk their dogs have figured out they just have to roll, and they can walk by it and stuff. So it's been, a little bit of a challenging fight, but it's the perfect place for a park. It's right smack in the middle of everything, and our Main Street that we're working on, we've been doing, monthly placemaking meetings with Nancy that we had suspended until after the auction that we're going to start up again. And with that was how to make Main Street more walkable. And our Main Street does not have trees, is that you're in the sun the entire time, and things like that, and adding trees and benches and things for people to, sit at. Plus, we also need to attract businesses back. I have a different perspective of Cornwall. I grew up there, so I have the 5- and 6-year-old memories of what Main Street was like and when you did all your shopping there before all the big box stores. Then as a teenager, being able to hang out there. Then I was a weekend person living in New York, and now I'm back as a business owner as well as a resident. And and the potential of what the street can be and, what else it can come back to be in. So,
Okay, good. There'll be more questions. Just remind everybody to speak into the microphone. I was just reminded. One of the things that I don't know if we mentioned, but we talked about Michael Lydon having come to a session early on, which was one of the kickoffs to this whole process. We've been going through this tactical urbanism pop-up planning process for a number of months now, and the Citizens Foundation was able to generate some grants to a number, about 8 projects, I think, and that's what we're going to have awards at the end of the discussion. But they've all been projects that have gotten people involved and people together, and I think they represent a lot of what we are trying to achieve. And I was looking at some of the presentations. I know the committee knows I didn't get to all of the discussions, but the Newburgh projects, the presentation, the pictures, the things that I saw, they looked like it was pretty exciting. I mean, there were a lot of people involved. There was so. Can you describe a little bit more about how the plan, or there's more the parking spaces and the spots and that were created?
So the 3 projects one is the Horizons on the Hudson crosswalk, creative crosswalk. Second one was Parking Day, and Anusha from Panja Culture was also a participant, where, hold on. And then the third one was just launched this week, which is Welcome to Newburgh mural sign. So I explained what the creative crosswalk was. Parking Day, for those that are not familiar, it's a worldwide phenomena that happens at the end of September. It's really easy and fun and can engage a lot of different stakeholders of the community. What it is, it's about raising awareness of how much space we allocate toward the private car or for motorists, and what storefront owners or organizations can do on that one particular day is set up a park. And it's called Parking Day, not for parking your car, but parking a park, something that is publicly used. So we did it last year, Newburgh Restoration, which is a local blog of Newburgh. We did it last year. I think we had about 3 different sites. This year, we had 11 different sites. And everybody came up with their own ideas of how to activate that space and engage passerbys. And it actually helps a lot of the small businesses attract attention, but get people into their stores. So whether it be the coffee shop or whether it be the local cafe, it creates an activity that people have a reason to come out. And then Welcome to Newburgh sign is very simple. Newburgh has 6 entrances. There is no sign that says welcome back home, or welcome to visit or whatnot. And I think that's a really important element, signaling that we are a warm community, which we are, and worked with a multi-generational artist, sign maker, Pat Nunari, who came up with a design that references some of the old ghost signs. Newburgh, as everybody knows, had a very vibrant downtown business, and you can see some of these signs, Shapiro's, Cadillac, whatnot, and so he did that typeface as well as sort of the cursive, which is, referencing sort of George Washington legacy there. I described these now, but I forget the question.
No, that was the question, except
Oh, what were they?
I mean, that was basically the projects that I
Yeah.
had seen the presentations
Okay.
of, that others haven't necessarily. And you have succeeded in getting a lot of people involved, and that was, I think, part of what this was all about.
Yeah.
And, so, okay.
I think as a planner, or it's curious to know how other people operate, but hybridity, mixing. There are times when you go deep and you target a certain audience group, and I think there are other times when you try to get the holistic. You capture the holistic community.
Okay, I'm going to ask Molly one question too, because I don't want you to feel left out. I know you've done a lot of things, and you've been involved with Illuminate Goshen for a long time. In fact, I think you established it, well, you and the mayor
Yeah,
established
Kyle
it.
and I co-founded
Yeah.
Illuminate Goshen in 2015.
Now, how did that interrelate with some of the downtown improvement projects that were sort of tested and then made more permanent and made into places?
Yeah, so it really allowed us, I think, the ability to fundraise, most importantly. Local governments cannot do that. They need people like us in this room to help them raise money that our tax dollars might not necessarily be allocated towards. And that was something that we were very successful in doing. We used our personal relationships and connected with our local businesses to see, can they help us? Can they get on board with some of the things that we're doing? Some of the major things Kyle implemented was new crosswalks in the entire village, which are beautiful. We always had crosswalks, but just switching from the white lines to a pressed brick makes all the difference. And the village is very historic, and we also have to work within the constraints of the color scheme. I don't know if all of those bright colors are necessarily going to fit in the village of Goshen, but you can certainly use some of those ideas and make it work for your space. We permanently closed Market Street a few years back, and that was huge, and it has become a little park. We have benches. Goshen and Bloom put planters in there. Our village planner is here today, Kristen O'Donnell. She's been instrumental in allowing us to really put those ideas. We've been lucky.
Okay. Okay, so now, maybe we have some more direct questions that we can ask the panelists if you want more expansion, further expansion of ideas, or how some of their experiences have might be transferred to your experiences. So whatever questions or comments that you may have on these projects. Gary, yeah.
Following up on you talking about the nonprofit being more flexible than the government with fundraising and so on. So when you guys would get money, did you spend it yourselves, or did you donate it to the village, or did you coordinate spending? How did that actually work?
So we actually are under the fiscal sponsorship of the Community Foundation of Orange and Sullivan County, so that was a very important relationship we built early on, and they manage our finances. So any money that comes in goes to the Community Foundation, and they really help us out. We pay for a lot of it ourselves, and then we'll get reimbursed. So I am actually not the president anymore. I just stepped down last year to do some other projects around the village, and I am not as involved with the actual fundraising right now, but what we were successful in, again, is making sure we made those partnerships with our local businesses. People who have donated continue to donate every year. We have an annual fundraiser. At every event, we offer sponsorships. Our pianos, we actually were so successful in that we created a second account with Community Foundation just for the pianos. So again, as you were saying, you start somewhere, and then you build and you build and you grow and you grow. And we really, knock on wood, have been very successful, and somehow we make it happen. We raise the funds, you figure out what you can do with it, and you put it back in the community. Every dollar we raise goes back into our community. Every dollar.
If I can just add on to the element of funding, I mean, I think the Orange County Citizen Foundation giving that grant, it's small, but it starts there. It has a good name, right? But that is, you're able to leverage that, right? And leverage is, there's excitement, there's momentum, there's the interpersonal, and I think, the tactical urbanism allows for that more than a massive capital project. But I would say one thing that is sort of missing in a lot of foundations and philanthropic efforts are quick grants, right? You don't want to write a grant that you're going to hear back from in, 6 months or a year, which is usually the time frame. Can the philanthropic community be more agile, more trusting, and, whether it's on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, and that the, requirements for reporting are simple so that communities can focus on the actual product and the process and not raising funds.
Were you able to hear Gary's question before that, do we need the microphones out there? Okay, we had a question here.
My question is, you're using public space. So if you are not a formal non-profit, how do you go around the situation of insurance for being in public spaces?
Like I said, you have to collaborate with these local organizations, and you really do need the government on board to allow you to fall under their insurance, allow you to get the proper permitting. You need to know the space that you're looking to do. We do use public spaces, and we've been lucky enough that the village is very supportive of the projects we do, and they've allowed us to come under their insurance. So each project is a little bit different. We host a New Year's Eve event, and that is going to be held at one of our schools. The school has been gracious enough to allow us to come under their insurance. So I think the success of small projects can grow, and you can say, hey, listen, we're able to host these community events, and nothing bad happens. And they'll let you do it again, usually.
Is that the case in Cornwall also with the bridge? Or, I mean, do you know?
Well, the Cornwall
Yeah.
Chamber has a policy
Oh.
that we have with the
Okay.
town that, so when some of our businesses want to do small things outside their store, use a sidewalk and things like that, and they're told by the town that they need it, we put them under ours. We open it up to the small businesses and stuff. And also stuff that the town also has, we'll put anything that, when we close Main Street and things like that to do, our bigger events, it's under their insurance as well as ours.
Okay. Question here, yeah.
So Naomi, if you could just speak a little bit about the Awesome Foundation, because, I organized an event and did get a small grant from them in a very short amount of time. And it's because it's something that every community could implement, and Naomi is part of that deal.
Yeah, you go on.
So Naomi has part of this organization called Awesome Foundation, Awesome Newburgh, and I think, 10 people agreed to put in $100 a month and give out small grants, I think a total of $1,000. Every month they award it. It's a really quick and easy grant. Myself and June Henry from Safe Harbors of the Hudson organized Newburgh International Day of Happiness, and we were basically paying for everything ourselves. Like Safe Harbors didn't give us any money, and it was fine. I mean, and so we applied for the $1,000, and it made the event. Just all we needed was $1,000. Like we could have even, it was just amazing, and we got it in 2 months. And so it's a way to maybe come to your community members who have, want to do something good and don't want to serve on a board all the time. And $100 for some people a month is not a lot, and you're funding really cool kind of pop-up projects.
That's very, very good to know. Question?
So I do have a question, comment, but I want to piggyback on this. It's so interesting. Gary, you may remember the Arts Council when we had years ago. I don't think I need it. Thank you. Oh, for the recording. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, so I forgot what we called it. But there were, what? Spark. Spark. Who's there? Who's that? Thank you, Nancy. And so, just really quickly, in case people are not familiar with it, we would get together, Arts Council folks, at some cafe or somewhere that would sponsor it, and we'd have a really very simple offering, like soup and bread and iced tea or something. I mean, it was really simple, but good and decent, so if you hadn't eaten, it was okay. And you paid $10 at the door. Everybody who came paid $10. So, artists were, well, in our case, it's artists, but were asked to offer up a project. Initially, it was wide open, and then eventually we started doing themes. We did a student theme and what have you. So however many artists applied that month for that project, they got to speak, and they got, 5 minutes each to speak and present their project. And then at the end of the night, they got we all voted, and somebody got the pot. So you actually got a little bit of a meal, this networking situation, this social situation. You got to see what everybody was talking about. And then the person who presented the most compelling project took the pot. So we did, I think the most we ever gave was like $2,000 or something like that. I don't remember. But,
More than a year, certainly.
yeah.
It was hard to sustain.
It was hard to sustain. It was hard to get people to keep coming. But people did get money. Somebody got a cement foundation for their monumental sculpture out of it, and somebody else got outdoor murals in Greenwood Lake. But anyway, it's a similar type of situation, and crowdfunding is terrific in that way, and yeah.
It's nice to be able to get quick, easy grants for something
Yeah.
that does not mean a lot of money.
It's creative.
And in it, I'm sorry.
So I had my initial, this was inspired by that. So I'm going to be a fly in the ointment here, and I'm going to be a little bit indelicate. I am known for not being very delicate. There are some things that were set up there that really sparked some thoughts. So everybody at one point mentioned everybody, and the town, and the people. We live in a region where we have a lot of people who are in the shadows, and that's increasing. And it's increasing, I think, more rapidly than many of us realize. And I'm not talking about a place like Newburgh or Middletown or Port Jervis, because in those places we're very much more aware of these things because they're cities. But I'm talking about the sweet little towns like Goshen and Cornwall and what have you. And I can't imagine a better room to mention this to, that I think as we talk about these things, we need to be more aware of this. We're in a room of very involved, very creative, very community-minded people, but we're very alike, basically. And sometimes we forget that when we say everybody, we're not including everybody at all. And so I think that if anything, I would love to ask people to be more mindful about that sort of thing, figure out ways to make sure that we're welcoming and that we know that those people are there and they need us. For instance, there's a beautiful, Molly spoke about this little pocket park situation that happened in Goshen. And it was so exciting, and it was so beautiful, and we talked about, we all voted on benches and what have you. That particular space has been completely taken over by 2 restaurants. So if you don't know and you're walking on the street and you look, you're not really going to walk into that space because it's filled with outdoor cafe tables to the brim and, completely. And there are people who do not feel comfortable sitting on those benches or going into that space. The rest of us are fine with it because we know, because we're privileged. And heck, that's my space and I can go there, sit. But we have people in our community who are not so comfortable. And that's just a small example. It's a changing demographic. And I think it's incumbent on us to remember that and to try to work with it a little more, because we're leaving some people behind even more than they already are. Thank you.
Okay, very good point. Anybody have any other comments? Yeah, John, yeah.
Can you put up some signage that'll help people know that it's a public area as opposed to a private area? Well, it is a public area that you did this in, isn't it?
I'm not sure you want to do that to the space, and I'm not sure that that's exactly the answer. I think it's a deeper issue, and I think that we're the type of people who can make those changes happen.
If I can just add 2 cents, which is, I think that's why it's so important to do things in the public realm. I think signage and proactive outreach and inviting for maybe Children's Day or something like that are different strategies. There's not one strategy. There are many that you have to employ. I also, when we did the crosswalk mural, it was many of the PTO, the parent-teacher organization, and their children that came, right? That was the built-in audience participate. But what is important to note is how many people were driving by, walking by, asking what it is. And I think we can't expect somebody to immediately jump in and pick up the paintbrush. It starts with, it's an arc. And so idea, explaining, talking, One thing that I think is really important with tactical urbanism projects in general, which I wanted to mention, is what's next, or where else can you stay connected to the effort is really effective, I think, in all our projects. So thinking of, like, you know, that arc of cultivation for getting more people engaged in citizenry. A good point.
I'm just going to ask one question related to that question. We talk about the importance of all of these projects. As you said, maybe the term was too broadly used as all the people, because we're looking for, the projects are looking for participation, for participation in the community, for interaction. Are we finding in any of these projects that you're involved with, or if there are others, that there is involvement from various segments of the community, or does it tend to be just one part of the community, like the artists, for instance? I mean, is there a broader participation in any of the projects?
I would say absolutely. Every project we do is a collaboration. I haven't spoken yet about our painted Trotter project, and that is one of my favorite projects we've ever done. It started with, again, an idea of painting a horse and putting it out for the community to enjoy. The first year we did 25 horses. We collaborated with the Goshen Art League. You had to be a member of the Art League to paint a horse. We reached out to our businesses for sponsorships of each horse. It was $100 to sponsor a horse, and it has grown. The horses themselves are actually cut out by the high school students in the tech lab up at Goshen High School. So when you talk about collaboration, you really do. The students are involved, the teachers are involved. We have people that dedicate and volunteer their time to help us do these things. And we do involve our entire community, and I think that's something we're very proud of.
Yeah, I think the question was actually deeper, even deeper than that. Yeah. Floyd.
No, you go first.
Thank you. I think I want to piggyback a little bit off of what was said, or what is being said in the room, and I suppose something as a creative placemaker. I'm a writer and an educator, and I have a healing center that doesn't only engage in, I guess, traditional means of healing or trauma work, but also non-traditional, and part of that very much is public placemaking, because that's where you're meeting people where they are at, and people, for example, who may not be looking for any kind of quote-unquote healing work then can engage in green spaces or the colors of murals and all the wonderful things that are created around that. And something that I'm really, I think, working to balance at this moment forward is how public placemaking, particularly in my experience, murals, because I'm starting with a park now, compliments of the Austin Foundation. Thank you, Naomi, also. But my experience is mostly around muralism and how that contributes to the gentrification of neighborhoods, which we, you know, it's kind of like a chicken and egg, right? Like it's attractive, particularly to artists, for like to pay lower rents and things. And just the way that I've seen the block turn where I am in Newburgh, I feel I've literally gentrified myself off the block, and my rent was raised, it was doubled in the course of 1 year once the building sold. And so I'm wondering how, like, what are the strategies that you use to employ to really make sure that projects are not just in their engagement rooted in the community, but that there's like longevity that continues to serve the community that is there amongst an increasing climate of gentrification everywhere in New York, really? Big question, sorry about that.
Eileen, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons, we're, working, to put this park there and stuff is to bring back, Cornwall went through some sections where our high school was moved out of the town itself and is located in New Windsor. And we're told that's when Main Street died, because the middle school, which was my high school, is there, and people don't drive on Main Street anymore. There'll be businesses that are on our Main Street, and people go, I didn't even know it was there. that's why we started having the Spooktacular, to show people with children, take your child in there to go and get a piece of candy, but look around while you're there and say, hey, you can come back and see this business. So, you know, with this project in mind, it's to bring people together on Main Street, to go into the ice cream store, get an ice cream, go and sit in this public area, and maybe you'll meet your neighbors again. You know, Main Street, when I was growing up there, you know, then teenagers were allowed to hang out. You know, we would all go after a basketball game or after this, and you would go to the local pizza place, and you sit on the Lemon Building steps across the street, and you'd all talk to each other, and you weren't shooed away and stuff. So we want to create a park and benches along the street where people can sit down, talk to their neighbors. You know, part of walkability is for people to get to know their neighbors again, and not just be in your car, be on your phone, and that's so, you know, it's to make the town, you know, more inclusive to people being introduced, and not just, I know you because my kid's in the same school as you, I'm a business owner, I go to the chamber meetings, you know, this and that, but to integrate everything together. So with this project, we've brought in, you know, all different groups consulting on it. We've stood on Main Street and had, you know, people come. We've had people with the kids come in, as well as, you know, things. So we kind of invite everybody's opinions on it and help to get it done. You know, we need, you know, the public, you know, to help us with that.
So, first of all, thank you, all of you, for what you're doing out there. I know it takes a lot of time, and it's probably mostly volunteer work that you do. So, thank you. So, in the interest of time, how do you find the time to do all of this? And where do you get your volunteers? And I'm interested in, been following the Illuminate Goshen pretty closely on Facebook. In trying to sort of emulate it in the village of Montgomery. So I'm very interested in how you organize it, how often you meet, you know, the nitty-gritty details.
So it started as two people with really crazy ideas. And one of them happened to be the mayor, and I'm a crazy worker bee. I don't stop. But you need to just set the time and make it happen. When you have the 5 minutes to answer the email, to make a quick Facebook post. But it's not sustainable with two people. So we have grown and we have created a board. We meet semi-frequently, depends on the events that we're doing. Sometimes we'll meet twice a month before a major event. Sometimes we won't meet for 3 months. Something that we have really tried to do. Hi, Kyle. I've been talking about you. Welcome. So something we've really tried to do as to allow Kyle and I to transition out is to bring new people on board and really map out the entire year. So we know every event we're going to be hosting, co-hosting. We know what we're doing a year out. And I think that because we've been successful previously, we're able to know the community is with us. And we know how much it's going to cost. We have been doing this so long, we're able to really plan it and pull some new things on board. Like we've got some great new projects coming in the village. And I think Illuminate has kind of given them a pathway to come forward and say, hey, they're doing something great. I've got good ideas too. And that's how it happens. You just have to have an idea and find the right people to make it happen.
Floyd, you had a question? Yes. Floyd Lapp, Rockland County resident, and it was incredible today coming north. I needed about 5 forms of picture ID to get here. That's a joke, bad one. Anyway, Mike Lydon in his presentation pointed out the importance of local government can't do it all. And I think the 3 panelists did a great job on pointing out, as much as they do, and they do great work, they also need local government. So a survey question to the audience. How many of you, almost 50 people out there, work for a local government? And that's my point. It's probably 5%. And somehow it would be great if we could all work together and get more municipal employees, be they planners, engineers, parks people, whatever, to get involved in this organization. I just became a member today, thanks to Stu Turner, and I'm not going to make that happen, but we all need to work on that, because I found there's another statement in New York City with all the great work community boards do, they're not governments. And with the Development Corporation I worked with, they're not governments either. And local government was so averse to working with us like we were some other thing. We weren't part of, we used to call it the boys, but now it's the girls and the boys. So that's my call to action. Somehow trying to get our municipal people out of the bureaucracy and to a terrific meeting like this to learn more about the good work that people up there and out there are doing. The end. Thank you.
Michelle?
Well, to follow up on that, I sit on the town board in Tuxedo, and with several people in this room and Bill, we have been putting together a economic development workshop. And so my question is, you know, I'm on the town board, and I'm looking to see what experiences people have had in other municipalities in forming an economic development council. I believe you mentioned Cornwall has one. And we work with our Chamber of Commerce, and we have many citizens now working. We have broken into about 7 different subgroups, looking at different plans for the town and marketing. So we're trying to move it to the next level, and you know, kind of after the election, we're now moving forward. So just looking for guidance on what other towns do in establishing economic development advisory committees, how they interact with the boards, and maybe Cornwall, you
Well-
seem to have
Well,
that
Cornwall's Town
experience.
Advisory Board is appointed by the board, and we're also told what we can work on by the board. So we come up with some things, and we gave them a list of 20 things, and we were given 3 that, you know, we could work on. We took a project that the Chamber was working on and created what was called Cornwall Rising, which was all around this pocket park, as well as some stuff going on Main Street. And, you know, in the end, it's stalled and not going anywhere. We've also, as part of, the Chamber has its own Economic Development Committee, and we've also, there's a new established private one that's going into, you know, to working on it, and then we're going to take our ideas to the board and try to push them and not be told what we can work on and stuff. You know, our Main Street leaves a lot of work. We're envious of the towns around us who have moved on while we still have empty buildings on our Main Street, and being told that there's nothing wrong with it is very frustrating. And so sometimes you need to go away from the town board and go to, you know, the private sector and, you know, work in that direction. And then in the end, you still have to go back to the board because they have to approve it. And as I learned from sitting on the board for this grant that we got for Main Street, going to 9 meetings and sitting there and doing research and getting plans done and having people come to the site and doing site walks and Orange County officials showing up and giving us all this stuff, that in the end, having a board member cross their arms and say, I'm not voting for this anyway, and not tell us why. So, you know, that's frustrating and stuff. So, you know, as far as, you know, your volunteers, you're there, you're giving your time. You know, I run a business, I run 2 actually, and, you know, do volunteer work, and I'm running a spectacular, and I'm running, you know, this, and, you know, you're doing all this other kind of stuff, and then you keep, you know, hitting a brick wall. So you have to keep people who are volunteering their time, you know, interested, and, you know, and you lose people along the way, and then you get people back, and, you know, because they're frustrated, they want to add to the process. But, you know, you have to deal with discouragement and this and that, and, you know, putting out a vision. And the best way to get people to work with your board is having a vision that's not going to shut them down.
I think the vision is where we're starting,
Mhm.
and then present that to the town board.
See, I think that part of the difficulty is that we've heard it said here, we've heard it said many times, planning takes a lot of patience, but it's very easy to say it takes a lot of patience, because when you're living it constantly and you're frustrated constantly, and you see what people are putting into things, and so it's easy for us to maybe sit on the side and say, well, you got to have patience, because you just run out of it sometimes, run out of energy, and, you know, so on. So it's good that you guys are staying with it. Another question.
No question. I wanted to make a comment in terms of those who have asked about volunteers. I have a very long history of both being a volunteer and managing volunteers for large organizations. And among the things I wanted to say is that you often hear people say that it's very difficult to find volunteers or for them to stay with you very long. Volunteers are very difficult to find if you have not defined what you want the volunteer to do.
That's true.
Nobody has the time to invent the volunteer position. So if you just say sign up and then you expect them to figure out what to do, very shortly you will leave them. I tend to tell people that I work with that think of your volunteers not as volunteers, but as your unpaid staff. Because the minute you stick staff at the end of it, everybody gets more professional, both you as well as your volunteer, so that you can truly depend on that volunteer. They know they're important. The second thing to do is, just as you would with your paid staff, you would write up job descriptions. You do the same thing for your unpaid staff. So again, everybody knows what they're supposed to do. And that's just a few of the things that I'd like to say.
That's very helpful insight. We have time for probably maybe two more questions. So let's hear these two questions or comments. They're all valuable.
Mine is a comment towards volunteers. I am a stay-at-home mom, and I live in Goshen. And if you live in Goshen, you know that we are organized and we fundraise nonstop for everything. We have something that's broad-based. It's called the $5 Challenge, where we challenge our community to donate money, and then it gets divided up to those in need. And that's broad-based. Then we have our moms, and we get things done. We just did a Friendsgiving that many of you may not have even known about, that we organized it, where we asked people to make a $10 donation and to bring a food to share. With that, we raised $1,300, I think we're up to. So it's knowing your community. So the best way to get volunteers is you have to engage. You have to know what the community wants. Because you talk to moms, they're gonna complain about something or tell you something really exciting that happened somewhere else, you gotta go see it. And I think that's the best way to do is, like, you have to be engaged. And I'm also a member of Junior League, so it would be wrong for me not to mention that we are an organization where we are training women to be volunteers and effective leaders within our community. So if you want more information or help with how to get sustainable volunteers, it's all about committee work and finding passionate people and not having them get burnt out. Sometimes the smallest projects can be the most passionate ones, and you shouldn't give up if you're just starting with maybe 2 or 3 people. Because regardless if you know this or not, people are watching you. And from stuff that I personally have done, I don't know them, but they know me, and they tell me that I've inspired them. And now they're excited to sponsor other projects that we want to do. So you have to be vigilant and that people are watching, but you have to let people know what you want to do, and you'd be surprised of who steps up to help you.
We have a second. Okay, we'll take 2 more. That's the 2 of you. Here.
Oh, it's really just a mini question. I just wanted to know, please tell me your name again. In the center.
Molly O'Donnell.
Does that mean that the work that you're doing is via a fully volunteer-led partnership with the city? And you have a full-time day job?
Yeah, I
elsewhere?
work full-time for Orange County government. I've been there 13 years. I work for Human Resources. And I also serve on the Village of Goshen Planning Board. I've been there for about 5 years. Previous to that, I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals for the village as well. So I am abnormally involved in my community. But yeah, I have a full-time job on top of all of this. So again, all of our volunteers are unpaid, even our board members, our presidents, everybody. Nobody takes a dollar out of the donations that come in to our nonprofit. And we've been successful.
So it's entirely volunteer?
Yes.
Nonprofit,
Yep.
no overhead whatsoever?
Correct.
Wow.
Okay. We have one more. Yeah. One
So
more,
I
and then
think,
we'll-
yeah, I
then we'll
think
take
Goshen
a
is
break.
really unique that way. We have a group of people who work extraordinarily hard, and if you looked from the outside, you would think that we're all getting paid. I mean, if you look at Molly, you look at me, you see what we do in the village. and people speak to us, they cannot believe we're not being paid. But the good thing about it is that we work collaboratively. Rachel, Molly, and Kyle was instrumental in I think, fostering initially that sort of culture, which is not always easy to maintain, but is definitely worth working toward. I wanted to respond to, I'm sorry, Tuxedo, right, was it? And you were asking about working with government or village or whatever. It's a double-edged sword, and it's really hard to, I mean, I'm coming from an artist and an activist point of view, so that's where, you know, my head is at, but it's very, very hard to figure out how closely you want to work before you feel that you're being absorbed and co-opted and that you're not autonomous anymore. So it depends very much on the projects that you're working at and what your focus is. Citizens for Street Art, which is winning the award later on, was an offshoot of several of us who are part of Goshen Art League, which is very closely tied to Illuminate and the Village. But we wanted to do something really completely autonomous, and we were careful about that. However, not having said that, Illuminate is one of the sponsors. You know, there are other sponsors, including the Goshen Art League, sponsoring the citizens. But you have to be really careful and look at what you're looking to do. Sometimes you get too deep in the woods and you're into the whole, and you have all the government support, but then you're no longer autonomous and you find that you're not really doing what you want, what you set out to do.
I think, knowing a little bit about Tuxedo, I think the positive part of what you're doing with the economic development is that you do have a mix of a range of volunteers and some of the government officials sitting together and talking. And I think that's a positive. Hopefully it's going to be positive in the end. Okay, it's just about quick time. Okay. Quick.
Listening to some of these comments. Here he is. Leadership. It's leadership. Kyle woke up slow motion Goshen and really did it. And he got his friends involved. And it's remarkable what happened. And our immigrant friend from Rockland County, why aren't the government people here? I don't know why, but Nancy's been taking great pains to invite them every year, year after year. and they don't show up. Michelle's here, and Valerie's here, and Bill's here, but, you know, there are dozens and dozens. And why don't they show up? I don't know. They don't think it's important, right? Kyle thinks it's important. I can't explain that, but...
Time is luxury.
I can explain part of it. Kyle, you can't say no to Kyle, so... Yeah, and Nancy wanted to say something.
I just want to say that the premise for placemaking and the project for public spaces has a great part of their website, which is the elements of place. And there are 11 points there that I encourage everybody to read. But one of the basic concepts of placemaking is that it doesn't fall on local government to do placemaking. It really needs to come from the local population to do it. And so it's great to have the elected officials in the room and the people that are appointed as well, but truly it needs to come from, right, it's community planning with community at the core. That's the definition of placemaking. So Washingtonville, for example, has been successful at sort of organizing themselves as citizens and as the downtown business community, but really as citizens, and then going to the local government and saying, this is what we want, and oh, hey, we're going to do a candidate forum this time around, and if you fall into the placemaking categories and you support our placemaking things, then we're more likely to vote for you. And that's why their mayor is more interested in placemaking than the former mayor. And so I think that just try to keep that in mind too, that we rely on, government is there. Where's Lou Marquette when you need him? Where is he right now? You know, Lou teaches us that government is there to help with regulation, not to be creative. And so it really falls upon the citizens to be creative. We got lucky with Kyle. He was a citizens first.
But I think Mike Lydon's presentation said government can't do it alone. They can't do it alone. But it is my view that having them involved and, having the citizens, the creativity come out of the community, go to the government has to do something. If they're part of the process, I think it's easier. It's just like the planning process. If the government can't do anything if they don't have the citizens, and the citizens also have a hard time getting things done, although they do. They do get things done, without having support from government in some form. So I think it's a mixed bag, but I think that's what we've been hearing today, and that's wonderful. It's good. We have a couple of minutes. My leader tells me we do have a couple of minutes.
Okay, just to put,
I've been hanging around you too long, and I'm so precise. I watch the clock, but go ahead.
just to put a reinforcement on what you just said, that's what I was trying to convey. And in fairness to this great group, it's not on you that I was talking. It's on local government out there, wherever you are. Get out of the office, come here, learn a little bit more about this good work. So in the holistic approach, when these volunteers and nonprofits, et cetera, come to you, you'll at least have a hint of the good work that's going on, not the public works, planning, zoning, and all that. Yeah.
Good. I think on that note, we probably should take a break. We should take a short break. Then we're going to hear a little bit more about how to finance things from people who got things done.
Very happy to be here again. If we could, I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit of background about each one of our participants. Thank you once again. I really appreciate you participating in today's conference. Hannah, what do you do for a living?
I am a stay-at-home mom. I worked in finance for 12 years in the city up until the day before my oldest son was born. And then, fortunately, I was able to make the choice to stay home, which is what I've been doing ever since for the last 7 years.
So as a stay-at-home mom, you must have a lot of time on your hands.
No comment.
Right. So did you grow up in Warwick? What brought you to the community of Warwick?
I did not. I grew up in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I also grew up in Germany. I went to Georgetown for college many years ago, and found my way up to New York, and yeah, the rest is history. My husband and I visited Greenwood Lake and Warwick, fell in love, and we've been here for 10 years.
Okay, so what drives you to be a volunteer and to volunteer your time in the community?
So it was interesting. I heard the last about half hour, I think, of the previous conversation you all had, and it was very community driven. It was a few parents seeing a need within our community, reaching out to our government officials to ask them if they had any plans to improve the playgrounds in our town. Unfortunately, they did not have the funds to do so at the time, and so we did not want to wait until our young kids were teenagers for there to be a new playground. So we wanted to find a solution as soon as possible, and we worked in a very close partnership, actually, with Mayor Newhart and the Village Board of Trustees of Warwick to make Warwick Playground Dreams a reality.
All right. How did you go about raising money to fund the construction of the playground?
So I have been thinking a lot about how to share the experience with you all. I think we recognized very early on, creating our own nonprofit, again, of all volunteers, unpaid volunteers, that in order to be taken seriously, we needed to find a fiscal sponsor who would support us and also communicate to the rest of our community that any funds that we raised would be handled correctly. That certainly is not to say that other community groups that are 501c3s are not fiscally responsible, because they certainly are. But in our case, we were a group of parents, and we were new to the nonprofit world. We were coming from a variety of backgrounds, and we knew that in order to be able to reach out to various donors, it would be helpful to have a fiscal sponsor. In our case, the Community Foundation of Orange and Sullivan, who has been around, for 20 years now, and has a very solid record of facilitating projects in our county. And so that, I think, is the first important piece. The second important piece was that our playground was community designed. So we reached out to all 3 school districts in the town of Warwick to ask all of the kids what their ideas were for the playground, what they wanted. That was very important. The children were already engaged in our project from day one. We also recognized in our fundraising model that we wanted this to be a community project from the funding perspective. We did not only want to reach out to some of the folks who were able to give us larger donations, but we really wanted everyone to feel that this was their playground, that they had a hand, a valuable hand in building this. So we had a year of our own fundraising events. We raised about $75,000 from those. That was definitely a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. We also spent a lot of time at farmers markets. Any local community event that was happening, we had a table and a booth there. And we had our design, and we were talking to people, engaging people, showing them the faces behind the name. And that was how we recruited other volunteers. Certainly went to a lot of Chamber of Commerce meetings and Chamber of Commerce mixers. And all of that, even though we live in the 21st century and you see these wonderful GoFundMes where people raise $1 million in 2 hours for whatever, that didn't work for us. For us, it was really important to get out on the street, to talk to parents, to talk to parishes, local civic organizations, businesses, let them know what we were about, what we were trying to do, and that we needed their help. So after we raised $75,000 from our fundraising events, the Village of Warwick was able to get a SAM grant for another $75,000. We also applied for grants ourselves, and unfortunately, as I'm sure many of you know, that's a tough road to go down, but we did get one. The Christopher and Dana Ree Foundation sponsored our wheelchair accessible merry-go-round. That was the second time we applied that we actually were able to get it, and we were so grateful for. Almost $400,000 that we raised came from local sponsors. We were able, because it's a playground, to break up the entire structure into little bits and pieces, tangible elements that people could get really excited about. I am sponsoring the stepladder and the tot lot. And they were really excited about it. Things that it's something that they can put their hands on. Actually having pickets that they could engrave their family's names or pay tribute to someone on, that has created a picket fence around the tot lot. Engraved, we all know about the engraved bricks, but those have been so meaningful to so many people. Being able to leave a loving tribute to someone, or a memory, or just a favorite children's literature quote for kids to see when they visit the park. All of those pieces helped create that balance. And I just wanted to illustrate how important those smaller component sponsorships were. Out of our whole budget, we raised over $37,000 from sponsorships that were under $2,000 each. And that started at like $200. And that's not even counting the $50 bricks, the $100 pickets. As one of our committee members' husbands so lovingly put it, we were slinging bricks everywhere we went. And you know, that's, at the end of the day, that I think is what has made our playground so magical for so many in our community. Not just the kids enjoying it immensely and spending hours there. I had one parent tell me that the biggest problem they have with the playground is that they can't get their kids to leave. Yes. But you know, everybody who goes there, they're pointing out their picket, they're pointing out the piece that their small mom and pop business was able to sponsor. And then because we had over 900 individuals actually come out, volunteer, and build this playground by hand with saws and drills and routers galore, you know, going out and pointing to their kids and grandkids. See that cornice? I built that. See the stecking? I lay the stecking. See those god-awful holes? I dug those 3-foot holes. So there's a lot of community pride in what we were all able to do coming together. It was not the work of one person. It was the work of a whole community.
Nice, nice. So you mentioned a SAM grant. What is that?
State and municipal grant.
Okay, and how did you go about obtaining that grant?
Well, so that's something that the village applied for. I certainly sat with the mayor and was able to provide the details for this. The SAM grant that they received was for the safety surfacing, so I was able to give them the estimates of the costs and how much was needed and so forth.
And how much were you able to get for the grant?
$75,000.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So you had to form a not-for-profit, and now you're the president of the Warwick Playground Dreams. You've built your playground. What do you do next?
We actually have a phase 2 right now that we're potentially looking at bringing in some equipment for teenagers and also possibly for senior citizens.
Okay. What advice can you offer our audience towards community collaboration? And I think the most effective outreach is your community outreach involvement, and that seems to be the key to your success. Is there anything you can tell our audience about community collaboration, the organizational factors, something that would help them take away from this conference and move into their community and make the same impact?
I would say it's very important to obviously be aware of your audience, and that in this day and age, it's very difficult to reach your audience. You have, because we all have our different channels of receiving news. We spread ourselves across the social media spectrum, certainly local newspapers, emails, but really, I can't emphasize enough, it was the face-to-face interaction. It was sending out individual emails to every business, getting out, walking into every business, and having those conversations, speaking to congregations. It took a lot of work. It absolutely took a lot of work. I think people think we're in the 21st century, and so it's easy to just kind of, shortcut it with technology, but it's not the case. I think truly the most effective thing is to have a group of people who are so committed to your mission, who can speak from the heart and speak knowledgeably about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and go and divide and conquer. Go out and talk to as many people as you can.
Thank you. I just got to say that having grown up in Warwick, Stanley Deming Park is it's sort of the heart of Warwick. It was where my parents used to drop me off for a day program. It was daycare before there was daycare. She would literally drop me off for the day. It was where I learned that 13-year-olds smoked, where it was okay to pee in the bushes, where it was okay to walk into town and go to the 5 and 10 store, go to Aiken's Pharmacy, perhaps leave something in your jacket on the way out. It was where you learned how to do all these other things from kids, and kids could be kids. And it really is a great transformation. The features that they've built there are actually, they're fantastic. So if you haven't had a chance to stop by Stanley Deming Park in Warwick, what you've done is truly amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so with that, I'm going to segue into talking to Mary Williams, Executive Director of Beautiful People, or The Beautiful People. Mary, I read your bio, and you have a very interesting background. You've come from a sort of from the Midwest. I just learned that both of you are from the Midwest originally. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Mary Williams. I'm currently the executive director at Beautiful People, which is a Warwick-based nonprofit. We do adaptive sports for children and young adults with disabilities. That's both developmental and physical disabilities. And we actually serve our sports programs are based out of Middletown, Goshen, and Warwick currently. We do soccer, basketball, baseball, and cheerleading, which I have fallen in love with. It's been a really wonderful experience. I've only been with Beautiful People since July of this year. Previously, I was with the Town of Wallkill Boys and Girls Club as the development director. And I just moved to the Hudson Valley a year and a half ago from Boston most immediately, but I've bopped around a lot of different places. From St. Louis originally, went to undergrad in Chicago, lived in Cleveland, Ohio for a few years doing a service program. Can you not hear me? Oh, I love Cleveland. I was in Cleveland for 3 years, and then I started my master's down in Atlanta and moved up to Boston from there. So I've been all over the place. My background is I studied divinity, so I worked as a both prison and hospital chaplain, and just was kind of trying to decide whether I wanted to go the chaplaincy route or the nonprofit route, because I was always working back and forth in nonprofits as well. And I ultimately decided that sustainability of communities and working with people who need it most in an organizational capacity is what I was drawn to and what gave me life. So that's where I am now.
Oh, well, thank you. What really drove you into working with kids in particular, or kids with physical impairments? Was there something in particular in your life that sort of forced you to gravitate towards helping people in need?
Big question. So one of my aunts, while I was growing up, had CP and cerebral palsy. And so we just kind of grew up knowing what it was like to be around a person with a disability, how to talk to them, how to engage with them. And obviously everybody with a disability is different, you know, but it was always just very normal to me to be around people with disabilities. And when I was in Cleveland, I was part of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps working at a homeless center, but in my free time from volunteering, I was volunteering at an organization that did adaptive sports for kids with disabilities. And in that capacity, I was a program manager, so I was driving a bus, picking kids up from school and home, and then I was driving them to programs, running the programs, doing snacks and dancing and cheers and all this kind of stuff with the kids. And that was really where I fell in love with working with people with disabilities. I was working as a part-time grant writer for that organization as well. And so that was really kind of where my passion for working with kids with disabilities came in. And so when I saw the executive director position at Beautiful People open up, I had really only heard of Beautiful People a couple months before that, from actually talking with Steve Jardine at Johnson Subaru, who did the Share the Love campaign for Beautiful People to help build their adaptive field. So when I saw that the position was open for Jan's position, I was like, well, I have to go for it, you know? So I tried it, and 7 members of the board came in and interviewed me, which was a little intimidating, but we all just hit it off, and it's been a really wonderful relationship.
Great. I think I know what a grant writer does. Could you explain a little bit to everybody else? It seems pretty self-explanatory. What do you typically do in a day if your role or your paid responsibility is a grant writer?
Well, first of all, anybody can be a grant writer, so don't be intimidated by the word grants. I know it can be scary, but I literally started as a grant writer when I was volunteering with the Interreligious Task Force in Cleveland, Ohio, and that was because I was committed to a project and I was passionate about a project and we needed money to fund it. So they asked me to start writing grants for it, and I did. So I think it's kind of hard to define what a typical day is for a grant writer. I think that one of the biggest pieces that it seems like everybody in this room has is passion and commitment to their project. I think that's the main component. If you're passionate about your project, you can write about it. You don't have to be a wonderful writer to be a grant writer. It can be a very communal process. I think it's the more eyes that you have on the grant, the better. I've had experiences with very, very small grants, and I've written federal grants to the NIH and the NSF, and so I really think that anybody can do it. It just takes persistence and passion.
Oh, thank you. What grant do you feel like you were most successful at? What was your biggest accomplishment? What are you sort of most proud of obtaining financing or funding for?
Sure. So in 2014, I was a member of a delegation that traveled from Cleveland, Ohio to El Salvador, and that was as part of an LGBTQ solidarity group to go down to San Salvador and support the first LGBTQ convention that was happening in the country. It was a pretty big deal that this was happening because El Salvador is a pretty traditionally Catholic and conservative country. So we went down there. Cleveland and El Salvador have a long relationship anyway, because there were nuns who were, it's a long story, but we'll skip that part. But they have a long history, so this wasn't out of the blue. But 13 of us went from Cleveland to El Salvador to stand in solidarity with this conference and just to raise awareness. Before they found out that we were coming, nobody was really paying attention to this conference. And then when they found out that we were coming, all of a sudden the government was super interested and wanted to meet with us and all these things. So during that time, we got to talk and meet with a lot of LGBTQ activists down there. And that was just super moving. But when we came back to Cleveland, we were like, we can't be done with this work. This can't be over. So then we went about trying to help bring some of the Salvadorans who were athletes to Cleveland for Gay Games 9, which is Olympic kind of deal that was happening in Cleveland later that year. And no teams from Central or South America had ever participated, so we saw this as an opportunity to help bring a team to the US for them to be able to meet some of these international delegates, things like that. So I wrote a grant to a very small group in Cleveland called the Cleveland Collectivo, which is just a group of citizens that puts their money together and distributes it to causes that they find empowering. So I wrote a grant for $1,800 to that group that would help bring 3 of the athletes to Cleveland, and we won that. And that was I think the most moving grant that I have gotten to see, because it was really wonderful to see these people who have experienced so much oppression and discrimination in their lives come and have this very liberating experience and be able to talk with people from around the world.
You have a fascinating background, really. I mean, you've traveled the world. It's amazing. Can you disclose some of your stagecraft, some of your tricks in being effective at applying for grants, and some of the things that the people in the audience would be interested in learning from your experience?
Sure. So I'm on the board of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and we had this conference called National Philanthropy Day last week. And I actually had the privilege of sitting where you're sitting to listen about grant writing. And that was very helpful. Biz Rowley from the Community Foundation was one of the panelists up here. And so she, as a grant maker, got to kind of talk about her experience. Looking at Bill.
I'm reporting that.
Yeah. I hope you're not recording this. Yeah. But one of the things that Biz said that really stood out to me was, I want to know exactly what you're asking me for in the first 3 lines of your grant. So put it directly. Make sure that they know exactly what your project is from the outset. A lot of people can get lost in the trying to tell a story, trying to make it very colorful, pulling on your heartstrings, or some people go the other direction completely and start with data and statistics. Don't do either of those things. Just start with what the project is and be very, very clear and upfront. From there, I think you can tie in a little bit of the storytelling. I think that especially when you're applying for smaller grants to community foundations and things like that, they do like to hear the very vivid impact that their money can have. So I think storytelling can be very important. But I think just being as direct as you possibly can is key.
That's great advice. Thank you. I'd really like to know, when should an organization think about hiring a professional grant writer versus trying to apply for a grant on their own?
I would say do what you can until you can't. I think you don't want to be spending money on paying a grant writer when you don't have any money in the first place. So I would really advocate for doing as much as you possibly can. And I think part of what Hannah said is really important, even in the grant writing process. Just getting out there and talking to people in the community is critical. Because if people have heard about it and talked to you, they're much more likely to want to fund you than if you're just a random person applying for a grant. So I think that the more you're out there and engaging with the community, success.
Thank you, Mary. Is there anything else you want to impart upon the audience before I ask Kyle some questions? No? Okay, thank you. Kyle Roddy, assistant principal at Goshen High School, maybe soon to be principal, who knows. Former mayor for the village of Goshen. Kyle, thanks for coming today. I live and work in Goshen, and under your leadership, this community has improved so much. You've made a tremendous impact. People like Molly in the audience and others in the audience as well have really changed and transformed Goshen in such a short period of time. It really has been wonderful to relocate into Goshen and kind of see that transformation happen. Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Why did you decide to run for mayor?
Sure. Thank you for the kind words. And I do want to mention 2 things real quick. A lot of the things that we put into place in Goshen and some of the things I'll talk about, I learned about and was inspired by through participating with the Citizens Foundation. So I want to thank Nancy and the organization for all I learned here over the years. When I was trustee, I was just 23, didn't know much about much, but being in events like this really gave me a dearth of knowledge on areas that me as a U.S. history major, went to college to be a teacher, had no connection to. So I want to thank the Citizens Foundation. And again, as mayor, I got to be in a lot of pictures, but Molly O'Donnell's been the beating heart of Goshen from day one, so I want to acknowledge that. I grew up in Goshen, and I just loved my childhood. I loved being able to walk downtown, walk to the Quick Stop, and buy candy on a Saturday. I would come home, and I would just be so happy to be home. I would be thrilled to see Goshen in the wintertime, the snow falling, and I just always knew this is the only place to live. I knew a lot of other people that moved off and, are seeing the world. My sister, who I love dearly, lives in Dallas now, and she's living the dream. But for me, there was only Goshen, and that's just how it is. So I moved home after college, and I knew I wanted to be involved. I started paying attention to what was going on, and I kind of became discouraged about ways I felt that things weren't moving forward in the direction that would be best for everyone. So I decided to kind of put up or shut up, and I ran for village trustee, and I was hooked ever since.
Okay. As a political leader, how do you go about looking for and asking for money, and what were some of the challenges you faced in funding your initiatives?
So, I was fortunate by being able to work as the mayor and also with Illuminate Goshen, because there's certain things that governments are able to get access to and certain things governments can't get access to, and vice versa in the nonprofit world. So, I found first it was just a lack of knowledge. Being, new in the game, there's no handbook for elected officials, and certainly on local government bodies. You have people that are coming in with all sorts of different backgrounds, and there are some trainings that are out there, but they really don't do justice to topics like these. So for me, it was a lot of education, certainly mistakes and learning from things that didn't work.
But what I learned over time was really to identify a large network and be educated on different opportunities that were out there. The most important thing I found was having a close working relationship with other elected officials, both on the local government level, but more importantly on the state and federal level, because a lot of times those are the individuals that have access to funds. So a lot of the things we were able to secure for the Village of Goshen was because of meetings I had with, at the time, Senator Bonasack or then Assemblyman Skoufis. But right now we also have extremely wonderful representation from Senator Metzger and Assemblyman Schmidt as well. We've been really blessed. So I think maintaining those relationships was number one thing to overcome those funding barriers and that lack of knowledge.
Can you be a little bit more specific about what grants you pursued and what initiatives you were able to implement through public financing or available grants?
Absolutely. So it starts with the why, and I think you heard a lot of this from people earlier today. We, for a while things were tough in Goshen. The government center had been closed down. We, seemed to be losing businesses, and there just wasn't a lot of electricity, so to speak. That's a connection to Illuminate Goshen. See what I did there? So there was just it was gray, I think is a good way to describe it. And we decided, we have to do something. We can't just, kind of rest on our laurels for things to improve. So we started a campaign called Goshen 2020. And that involved really identifying, I think this was 2015 when we started. It doesn't sound impressive now because it's almost 2020. But we wanted to identify what do we as a community want to look like in 2020. So we held a number of public forums. We had a youth summit. We had community meetings where people from the community came. Those were called charrettes when I learned about them here. And we did a survey, and we just got all this feedback from people across the community to identify what do people want to see more of? What do we want to be? Because the future of a local government should not be based on the viewpoints of 5 individuals that might be on a village board, or even 15 individuals that might be among all the different land use boards and municipal board. It needs to be community-wide, and the only way you get that is if you're asking questions of what everyone wants to hear. So we had these meetings, we built this vision, and then the idea was, okay, what do we want to be? And, a lot of similar things that, I'm sure were talked about today: walkability, economic development, vibrancy, arts, music. How do we actually attain those goals? So then we kind of came up with a laundry list of these are all the things that would be nice to have, and then identifying, okay, what's the budget, how viable are certain things, and then identifying targets to go after for each of those. And in a lot of ways, the local government was key for infrastructure. You can't have a vibrant storefront in a place where the sidewalk is maybe in disarray. Or if there's, in Goshen's case, 10 years ago, sewer overflows in the street in front of that business. So local government, we were able to secure, we did SAM grants as well, and that's really a wonderful example. So those were a big one for us, but there's also specific grants that you can find looking in different state agencies. So the DEC oftentimes has grants available, Department of Transportation. NYSERDA is wonderful. We were able to get funding for an electric car charging station in Goshen through NYSERDA. So it's a lot of time, but it's one of those things, and I totally agree about the point about the grant writer. Don't hire it unless you need it, because many hands does make light work. If you can divide up on a municipal board or a nonprofit board for that matter and say, listen, you spend, half an hour a week on the NYSERDA website, you take DOT, you look at these press releases, it's putting that time in and learning about all that stuff. And forget about, there's also the for-profit area where, Lowe's, for example, gives out grants. And there's all these private entities that have funding, the Gates Foundation. I never got a Gates grant, but, those are things that are certainly out there. I get so excited, I forgot where this question began. I'm going to be completely honest with you.
Really, I think what we want to know is, in your position, do you have somebody on staff who helps you pursue grants, and how do you go about getting them? What were you successful at in Goshen in attracting or applying for grants?
So the Village of Goshen doesn't have a paid grant writer, but we have, Kristen O'Donnell is the village planner, and we work very closely together. And prior to that, Stu Turner, we also work closely together. So these are 2 wonderful professionals that are in the game that really understand a lot of those nuances. So that's really important, and I think that credit is well deserved on both ends. But certainly myself did a lot of research. No one can tell your story as well as you can. So I was never a big fan of contracting things out that I could do myself. Certainly the engineering side, it ain't me. But, in other areas where, especially, and I think that compelling narrative and summarizing in the front end is very important as well. But having a compelling narrative and also showing that you have the money to make up for whatever isn't available. A lot of times, state or federal grants will say, if the full amount of funding isn't awarded, how much would you be able to provide? And you always want to say zero because you want them to give you the full amount. So you're kind of like not showing your cards. But it's important for these other groups and even New York State to know that you have some skin in the game. So I think that there's certainly a role. A lot of the very nuanced infrastructure grants I would rely on engineers and planners for. So something that involves like a water treatment plant, which we applied for some things, or sewer plants. Which, while might not be, relative to placemaking directly, are certainly very impactful when you talk about capacity and the services. But those are ones that I would really identify. And I would also acknowledge our police department. They got all their own grants. Our police chief is very, very intuitive about identifying those funding streams. So they did a nice job as well.
So besides Molly and Kristen, how did you cultivate your leads to find grants?
So a lot of it was talking to a lot of people. I'm a firm believer that, hard work should be rewarded. As the mayor, I was in a lot of pictures and ribbon cuttings, but I acknowledge people like that because it's important to, because no politician does it all, and a lot of times the politicians are the ones that do the least. Let's call it what it is. I'm out of politics now, so I can say these things now. I feel so liberated. But it was talking to others that have been successful. And identifying strategic partners within the community that were able to get involved and provide vision. I'm not an artist. I played the drums in high school, but I'm certainly not a musician. So those are areas where, I didn't have a lot of background. And again, like the Goshen Art League, for example, as another strategic partner. And I think collaboration's probably been a theme today. But talking to those people and working to just education. It took work. It was research on my part and the part of other people to be on these websites and saying, I wonder what press releases the DOT put out this week. That's not fun. But it's critical. And you only have to hit once for it to make a big impact.
So I have 3 kids in the school district. You're the assistant principal at Goshen High School. How are you going to take the leadership experiences and this grant effort as the mayor and transcend that into leadership in our educational system?
So I can't confirm or deny anything, but Goshen School District is working on some grant opportunities. So, stay tuned, no promises. But a lot of it is really looking at connecting the resources in a school or school district to those outside of a school. When you have an organization in the school, whether it's a club or just a class, connect with an outside agency, that might not be called a grant, but you're still getting outside support for something you do internally. So I think that, the way I look at the world as always ripe with opportunities to form those connections is really important. And looking at those funding streams, looking at, again, in education, there's not a whole lot of direct state money that, you can get from your members, but there is the SAM grants, there's Bullet Aid and Foundation Aid, which as an assistant principal, I have nothing to do with. But being able to research those agencies and certainly, looking at, NYSERDA does certainly work with school districts. So a lot of those agencies that work with local governments do work with school districts. The best thing about being an assistant principal, I don't have to worry about sewer anymore. And that's just, I miss it sometimes. But, there's a lot of opportunities as well. And again, with larger nonprofits and private business, we built a new STEAM lab, and Matt was our architect, so he gets a lot of credit for that. But with the new STEAM lab, we needed to figure out what are we going to teach in here. And Danielle as well, I want to also give, and I know there's other LAN folks here, I'm sorry, I can't see everyone. But, LAN did a wonderful job. So we had this new STEAM lab coming in, and the question was, well, what are we going to do with it? We're going to have a lot of computers, some robots, some 3D printers. So we were able to get a grant from Amazon, who gave us all the curriculum for 2 computer science classes. So that gave us a jump start right out of the gates, and that just happened last year. So we were able to hit the ground running on day 1 in the STEAM lab, partially due to that grant from Amazon.com.
Kyle, thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to tell the audience before I turn it over to questions?
No, I would just keep going.
I was hoping for that. Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to ask a question from our panelists? Yes.
Thanks. You mentioned the sewers and the garbage removal. And I think your exact phrase was, you can't have a thriving business when the sidewalks are really tarnished outside of it. And I'm really curious. The sidewalks in my block, on my block, are a problem, but more of a problem is the garbage removal and disposal. And I'm really curious if you have any insight, hacks, tips as to, I think most importantly, get involved, like have the community be involved in whatever the change is, because there's community cleanups that are organized periodically. I host them a lot of times as like a meeting place at my business, the Healing Center Punja, and in an hour, it's like totally trashed again.
Sure.
And just like even looking at the relationship to the way that like the cans are, I guess, like disposed of in the trucks when they come by, it's like, it's really, really, really sloppy, and I feel like there's an uncanny and unprecedented amount of trash, particularly on my block, even in like a 5-block radius around, that is experienced or part of the same, perhaps like socioeconomic bracket or like cultural relevance, and so I need help.
So I would start with identifying logistically whose responsibility is what. So in Goshen, the property owner actually owns their sidewalk. So they aren't the ones that typically can apply for grants. So the local government can sometimes pursue grants, but if a sidewalk is chipped, then the municipality can go after that local homeowner if it's a safety concern. So it depends on the code and ordinances where you are to know whose official responsibility that is. But speaking about trash removal, certainly, there's private removal and then there's public removal, whether it's done by a city or a municipality or a private hauler, But really, it comes down to how people feel about that area. There's a reason that people litter in an area, and it's not because, a garbage can, is close to the corner, whereas it's, could be 20 feet away. It's if they value that space, if they love that space, if they have pride in that space. So there's a great story about a city, and I forget the name of it, in Albania, where it was after the Cold War, and the city was just kind of in disarray. There was a lot of crime, garbage everywhere, and in this case, it was the mayor. He took a building and he painted it neon orange. And people were upset and confused because why is this neon orange building in the middle of the city? But people just loved it. And other people started painting their buildings these outlandish colors. And what happened was people stopped littering. People started cleaning up the parks. People stopped, not caring about a broken window that was in front of their house. And people had that buy-in. So a lot of times, garbage on the streets is more of a symptom of a larger problem than a problem in of itself. And I would advocate, maybe more garbage cans or nicer ones, but I think it's the overarching thing about how much do people in that neighborhood feel like they are a part of that neighborhood. And if they don't, which is potentially the case if there is a lot of public littering, how can those individuals be engaged through some kind of partnership? It's not easy. And, it would be nice if it was as simple as just, a call to City Hall or installing additional garbage cans. But if people are littering, that means they don't feel like they are connected to that local place. So that's when you need to engage the neighborhood or the larger community to say, what can we do to engage this part of our population that just doesn't feel like, they need to treat this place as home? Because it sounds like that's what's happening. So I'm not saying you have to, color every building bright orange, but it worked there. Okay. Okay.
One thing that does come to mind, and I think this is the only negative that I can possibly have about being a component fund of a fiscal sponsor. A lot of foundations do not award grants to community foundations because they view them as pass-throughs. So that was quite frustrating for us. Certainly, when we applied to the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, Mayor Newhart wrote a beautiful letter supporting us. One thing I also wanted to mention was I think it's very important in your fundraising approach to have that phase one focus on building the community support, and whether that is through individual small dollars, fundraising events, but being able to then present that to in your application, showing how much you were able to raise from X number of donors who contributed $5 up to what have you. That is crucial. But yeah, I know that doesn't quite answer your question, Lou, but that's one thing I did want to mention, because it was kind of a startling bummer for us as we were going through the application processes.
I've heard that the organizations that fund like to see multiple constituencies in the application. And so by having different people sign on as partners in the application, that sometimes that can be beneficial.
That's been my experience. In Boston, I was working for a research center, and so there we were collaborating with other research centers and submitting these NIH, NSF, and other Department of State grants. And all of the federal grants that we submitted wanted to see that you were collaborating with other groups and individuals. Also, some of the foundation grants that we submitted when I was at the same place, they wanted to see that you were collaborating with local organizations. I think that a lot of these foundations and other entities want to feel like their gift is making the greatest impact possible, and I think that people see collaboration as one way of doing that.
Yeah, and I would offer that it really depends on every individual circumstance. If you have a local government that hasn't built up a group of alliances with nonprofits, you can't force it. You can't put that round peg in a square hole and try to make everyone a happy family and then submit the application. You need to build that over time, and then you're providing a meaningful application that identifies those things. And again, putting aside the infrastructure stuff, those other more placemaking-ish grants, these organizations that are deciding whether or not you're getting the money, they know your success is going to be contingent on collaboration, so they're absolutely going to want to see that. So I certainly encourage it.
I just wanted to say that on the volunteer issue, very often applying for grants, I worked in the museum world. They wanted to know our volunteer hours. That was part of what we put into the grants, because that would show how much community response you had. So if I could say my volunteers did 10,000 hours, that was a huge help for getting the grant.
All the way in the back.
I just wondered, is there a clearinghouse or something where you can go and look and see what grants are available, or do you have to go to every single website and look?
So New York State has the consolidated funding application, and that's on the state's website. If you go to regionalcouncils.org or .gov, the consolidated funding application takes basically all the state's money. It's not federal and it's not local or private, but all the states, and then you basically say, this is my project, and it's click through, and it'll direct you to the appropriate funding stream. So in terms of the state, it's helpful. It can be a little arduous because they require a whole lot, and some of it does get kind of technical depending on the grant, but at least there, certainly in terms of state money, there is one central place.
In terms of foundations, there's a website called candid.org that was actually just founded this past February, and that's a collaboration between the previous foundation directory online and GuideStar. So they came together and joined forces so that all of their information is in one spot. Foundation directory online you do need to subscribe to get the full effect. But there is a smaller version called Foundation Directory Quick Start that you can subscribe to for free, and that will give you access to over 100,000 foundations and information about those foundations.
We have another question up here.
Similarly, there's Foundation Center Library, and I don't know if
It's part of the
yeah, they become. So Foundation Center Library has a lot of resources. I haven't used it since it was on microfiche, so it's been a long time. But and again, if you pay, and it's pretty affordable. If you pay, you get great information. If you don't pay, you get that little limited. But if you want to test it out.
Also, a lot of local libraries subscribe to it, so you could go to your local library and see if they have a subscription first.
All right, well, we'll take one more question. John?
I said STEAM.
Yeah, you got to include the arts.
Is now an arts combination into that. And this related part of that question, is it only for educational institutions from Microsoft, or does it apply to communities as well?
The Amazon grant, I believe just education, because it's a curriculum, but would there be a way to access that privately? Maybe. I'm not positive about that.
I'm not thinking of a private grant. I'm thinking of who does it apply to? Only to educational institutions or only to? Do you know that?
I'm not sure. I mean, it certainly was presented to us as a curriculum. They call it Future Ready, to help young people learn about computer science when they graduate. But I'm sure there's programs out there for adult education or professional development for anyone can benefit from this stuff at this point.
Okay. That's clear. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I just also want to add that the foundation, is it Foundation Center? I can't remember, but the Newburgh Free Library owns it, I think, right? Is Mary Lou still here? She left. Okay, but I think the Newburgh Library has it, owns a subscription, so you can go to the Newburgh Free Library and get that. And I believe the county also has access to it, and the county has a grant writer that you can access. Bill, is Bill here? Hi, Molly. Okay. And I think that they can put you in the right direction for some of that as well. Okay.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for participating today. Thank you. Thanks to our panelists.
Great meeting you.
One last thought. I was a trustee for the Orange County Citizens Foundation. It's a great organization to get involved with. This is really my opportunity for atonement and not participating as actively this year in a placemaking conference. So just be aware that anytime they're looking for volunteers, if you're not in the room, you will be nominated. And that's sort of my parting words. Thank you for participating.